TV soap news and spoilers say that at the heart of this simmering tension were three men, Doug, Randy, and Joey, bound by friendship, betrayal, and a dangerous game of vengeance that could cost one of them their life. The question on everyone's mind was simple yet chilling: would Joey die? And was Doug, the man who once called him a brother, now plotting his demise? A bond forged in time. Doug and Randy's friendship was the stuff of legend in Crestwood. They had grown up together, two boys who shared everything, secrets whispered under the stars, dreams of escaping the confines of their small-town lives, and the scars of a childhood marked by hardship. They were inseparable, their loyalty forged in the crucible of youth. Doug, with his sharp mind and quiet intensity, was the planner, the one who always had a way out. Randy, on the other hand, was the wild card. Charismatic, reckless, and tethered to a past filled with shady dealings and questionable alliances. Yet, despite their differences, their bond held firm, a constant in a world that often felt like it was unraveling. Randy's past was a tangled web of half-truths and dangerous connections. He had run with a rough crowd in his younger years, dipping his toes into the murky waters of petty crime and underground deals. There were whispers in Crestwood about his ties to a smuggling ring that operated just beyond the town's borders, though no one could ever pin anything concrete on him. But Doug didn't care about the rumors. To him, Randy was the brother he never had, the one person he could trust when the world turned against him. And now, with a storm brewing in Doug's heart, that trust would be put to the ultimate test. The spark of betrayal. The trouble began with Joey, the third piece of this volatile triangle. Once a close friend to both Doug and Randy, Joey had carved out a different path in Crestwood. Charismatic and cunning, he had climbed the ranks of the town's underworld, building a small but lucrative empire through money laundering and backroom deals. His charm masked a ruthless streak, and those who crossed him often found themselves regretting it. But Joey's greatest mistake was underestimating Doug, and the lengths to which a betrayed man would go to protect what was his. Doug's marriage to Vanessa was the cornerstone of his life, a beacon of stability in a world that often felt chaotic. Vanessa, with her warm smile and fierce loyalty, was the one person who could calm the storm in Doug's soul. But even she wasn't immune to Joey's influence. For reasons Doug couldn't fully comprehend, Vanessa had been drawn into Joey's schemes, laundering money through a series of shell companies that operated just beneath the radar of Crestwood's sleepy law enforcement. Doug had pleaded with her to stop, to sever ties with Joey before it was too late. "He's dangerous, Vanessa," Doug had warned, his voice trembling with a mix of fear and anger. "He'll drag you down with him." Vanessa, torn between her love for Doug and her entanglement with Joey, had tried to reassure him. "I'm handling it, Doug," she'd said, her eyes pleading for him to trust her. "I'll get out. I promise." But Doug's trust was eroding, worn thin by the knowledge that Joey had wormed his way into their lives, planting bugs in Doug's car to keep tabs on him. Vanessa had discovered the device during a routine cleaning, a tiny black box tucked beneath the dashboard, its blinking red light a silent accusation. She'd confronted Joey, her voice shaking with fury. "He's still my husband, Joey. I won't let you destroy him." Joey, ever the manipulator, had brushed off her concerns with a smirk. "You're in too deep, Vanessa," he'd said, his tone dripping with menace. "You walk away now, and I'll make sure you regret it." But Vanessa's resolve held firm. She warned Joey to back off, telling him she'd convinced Doug to let go of his vendetta. For a moment, it seemed like the storm might pass. But Joey's arrogance and Vanessa's divided loyalties had only fanned the flames of Doug's rage. A plan takes shape. Doug was not a man to be trifled with. Beneath his quiet exterior burned a fierce determination, a need to protect what was his and to punish those who dared to threaten it. Joey's betrayal. His audacity in spying on Doug, in pulling Vanessa into his web, had pushed Doug to the edge. He knew he couldn't confront Joey alone, the man was too powerful, too well-connected. But Doug had something Joey didn't, Randy. It was a crisp autumn evening when Doug made the call that would set everything in motion. He'd bought a new burner phone, a cheap model from the gas station on the edge of town, to ensure his conversation couldn't be traced. Sitting in the dim light of his pickup truck, parked in an empty lot where the streetlights barely reached, Doug dialed Randy's number. His heart pounded as the phone rang, each tone amplifying the weight of what he was about to do. "Randy," Doug said when his friend finally picked up, his voice low and urgent. "I need you." "Where are you?" To Doug's shock, Randy wasn't halfway across the state or holed up in some dive bar on the outskirts of nowhere. "I'm at Orphy Jeans," Randy replied, his voice casual but tinged with curiosity. "Just grabbed a booth in the back." "You okay, man?" Orphy Jeans was a Crestwood institution, a greasy spoon diner where the coffee was always burnt and the jukebox hadn't been updated since the 80s. It was the kind of place where secrets were shared over plates of soggy fries and whispered deals were struck in the shadows. Doug's pulse quickened at the thought of Randy sitting there, so close, so ready to be pulled into the plan that had been forming in Doug's mind for weeks. "I'm coming to you," Doug said, his voice steady now, resolute. "We need to talk." The meeting at Orphy Jeans, the diner, was nearly empty when Doug arrived, the neon sign outside flickering like a dying star. Randy sat in a corner booth, nursing a cup of coffee and picking at a half-eaten slice of pie. His leather jacket was slung over the back of the seat, and his eyes, sharp and knowing, flicked up to meet Doug's as he approached. There was something in Randy's gaze, a spark of recognition, as if he already knew this wasn't a casual catch-up. "Been a while," Randy said, leaning back in his seat. "You look like hell, Doug." Doug slid into the booth, his hands clasped tightly on the table to keep them from shaking. "It's Joey," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. "He's gone too far this time." Randy's expression didn't change, but his eyes narrowed slightly, a sign that he was listening, processing. Doug poured out the story, the bug in his car, Vanessa's involvement, Joey's threats. He didn't hold back, letting the raw emotions spill out as he described the betrayal that had cut him to the core. Randy listened in silence, his fingers drumming lightly on the table, a habit from their younger days when he was sizing up a situation. When Doug finished, Randy leaned forward, his voice low and deliberate. "You want him gone, don't you?" Doug hesitated, the weight of the question pressing down on him. Did he want Joey dead? The thought had crossed his mind more times than he cared to admit, flickering in the dark corners of his thoughts like a candle in a storm. But saying it out loud, committing to it, was a line he hadn't yet crossed. Until now. "I want him stopped," Doug said finally, his voice steady but laced with something darker. "Whatever it takes." Randy's lips curled into a faint smile, the kind that sent a shiver down Doug's spine. "You know I'm in," he said. "But this ain't gonna be clean, Doug. Joey's got eyes everywhere. We do this, we do it smart." A plan born in shadows. Over the next hour, the two men hashed out a plan, their voices hushed as the diner's lone waitress refilled their coffee cups with a bored expression. Randy's experience in the underworld gave him an edge, a knowledge of how to move unseen, how to strike without leaving a trace. Doug, with his meticulous nature, filled in the gaps, mapping out Joey's routines, his weaknesses, the places where he was most vulnerable. Joey's empire, they knew, was built on fear and control, but it wasn't impenetrable. He operated out of a warehouse on the edge of town, a nondescript building that served as the nerve center for his laundering operations. It was heavily guarded, but Randy had contacts, old associates from his shadier days, who could provide intel on the security setup. Doug suggested luring Joey out, away from his fortress, to a place where they could confront him on their terms. A remote cabin in the woods, perhaps, or an abandoned lot where no one would hear the fallout. The plan was audacious, dangerous, and fraught with risk. If they miscalculated, if Joey got wind of their intentions, it wouldn't just be their lives on the line, Vanessa would be caught in the crossfire. Doug's heart ached at the thought of her, torn between her loyalty to him and the chains Joey had wrapped around her. He had promised her he'd back down, that he wouldn't go after Joey. But that promise, made in a moment of weakness, felt like a betrayal of his own resolve. Joey had to be stopped, and Doug couldn't wait any longer. The weight of the decision as the night wore on, Doug and Randy's conversation grew more intense, their voices dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. The diner's fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, casting harsh shadows across their faces. Randy outlined the logistics, how they'd need a clean vehicle, untraceable weapons, and an alibi that would hold up under scrutiny. Doug listened, his mind racing, as the reality of what they were planning sank in. This wasn't just about protecting Vanessa or reclaiming his pride. This was about crossing a line from which there was no return. "Do you think we're doing the right thing?" Doug asked suddenly, his voice breaking the rhythm of their plotting. Randy paused, his coffee cup halfway to his lips. "Right?" he said, his tone laced with bitter amusement. "There's no right or wrong in this, Doug. There's just what needs to be done. Joey's had this coming for a long time. You know it, and I know it." Doug nodded, but the knot in his stomach tightened. He thought of Vanessa, of the life they'd built together, of the promises they'd made. He thought of Joey, the friend who had once stood by his side, now a stranger cloaked in ambition and deceit. And he thought of Randy, the man who had never let him down, who was now willing to risk everything to help him see this through. The calm before the storm. By the time they left Orphe Jean's, the plan was set. They would strike in a week, when Joey was scheduled to oversee a major deal at the warehouse. Randy would handle the muscle, calling in favors from his old contacts to ensure they had the upper hand. Doug would be the bait, drawing Joey out with a carefully crafted lie, a meeting, a truce, something to lower his guard. The details were still murky, but the intent was clear. Joey's reign in Crestwood was coming to an end. As Doug drove home through the quiet streets, the weight of their decision pressed down on him. The town seemed different now, its familiar landmarks tinged with an ominous glow. He wondered if Vanessa would ever forgive him, if she would understand why he had to do this. He wondered if he would ever forgive himself. Back at the diner, Randy lingered in the parking lot, lighting a cigarette as he stared up at the starless sky. He knew the risks, knew the cost of what they were about to do. But for Randy, loyalty to Doug trumped everything else. If Joey had to fall, so be it. The only question was how much blood would be spilled in the process. The road ahead in the days that followed, Doug and Randy moved with purpose, their plan taking shape in the shadows of Crestwood. They met in secret, refining their strategy, anticipating Joey's moves. Vanessa remained unaware, her days filled with the quiet tension of a woman caught between two worlds. Joey, for his part, seemed oblivious, his arrogance blinding him to the storm gathering on the horizon. But in a town like Crestwood, secrets had a way of unraveling. A misplaced word, a suspicious glance, a forgotten detail could bring everything crashing down. As the day of reckoning approached, the question loomed larger than ever: would Joey die? And if he did, would Doug and Randy emerge unscathed, or would their plan consume them all? We hope you enjoyed it and look forward to sharing more with you in the future. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. TV soap news and spoilers for more updates on Beyond the Gates.